Hi, Matt.
Hi.
Yeah, so we have your name on a few of our boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How come?
Because I made a game. It's pretty good.
You made a good game. Yeah.
I think so. Fingers crossed. We'll see what the kids have to say.
Well, it's not for kids.
It's fair. I mean the kids in a metaphorical sense.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
The cool kids.
The cool kids. Yeah. So when did you start?
On that game?
No, designing games in general.
When I was a little kid, and then just kind of stuck with it. One of the first things I did that was like actually somewhat meaningful was we did a whole massive custom board and a whole bunch of additional rules on Fireball Island when I was in high school.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this was like the mid '90s, and yeah, it was pretty cool. I just I grew up in a game family and played games, and actually found randomly I was moving a bunch of stuff at my mom's, and I found like this little pack of prototype stuff from like 20 years ago. It was like this little card game about vines growing.
That you made yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. And when did you get into that professionally?
So I was sort of volunteering for companies, maybe like 15-ish years ago. I started doing conventions for like Wizards of the Coast and stuff. And then that just sort of like over time snowballs into getting paid to do conventions, into getting paid to do sort of work in between conventions, into getting this side hustle and that side hustle, and sort of piecing together stuff. Worked in manufacturing for a bit, and have mostly sort of like put together a bunch of pieces so that I can do the stuff that interests me most.
And what is it that interests you most?
Yeah. So what I'm really excited about, the more than anything, is getting to make sort of like more unique experiences, pushing what we can do with games, really leaning into the things that are intrinsic to the physical space in which we're playing. So like Team 3 falls into that, despite being like a relatively simple game, in that it's physical, so you have to experience it around a table. So much of it is communication based, which again, the around the table experience of communicating, the facial expressions, the language, the tone of voice, so many of these things are again intrinsic to this tabletop experience. And so while it's a simple game that sort of falls into a kind of traditional understanding of a tabletop game, it also, again, it really is intrinsic to that place and that experience. So that's really interesting. And then doing games that are more challenging in theme or mechanics, working on stuff about divorce that makes you sad, or a game about civilian casualties during bombing campaigns, and stuff that is not as fun, but sort of exploring that medium of interactive tabletop experience. And then the other thing that sort of circles around that as well is I'm doing a lot more experiential design stuff. So I did a project with the Yale Center for British Art, where I designed a game that you play through the galleries, and it has you involved in choosing different paintings for different shows, and everybody's trying to figure out where your thematic groupings are, which is a relatively straightforward experience, but it gets you actually moving around the gallery and interacting with paintings in this gallery in a way that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise. It has you looking more closely. Now you're not just looking at the painting itself, you're looking for thematic elements, little deeper things, so that you can look at the potential links, right? So if you're playing it as like a little kid, it's like, oh, there's horses. But you might actually be really, in an advanced way, making the game or your theme about something like camaraderie or...
So what do you think is some of the main factors that for a human being, what is it that attracts in gaming and not, in games as such?
I mean, I think that we enjoy that kind of idle play. I mean, I think you look at animals, everything, like so much is tied around this kind of play, this sort of creative brain side of things, and that we love challenges, we love sort of light structure to our kind of play and recreation, and especially as games have become more and more sophisticated in terms of the way that people are engaging. The ability to create these experiences and draw people in and really play on the psychology of what humans are innately drawn to. Modern gaming especially really does this incredible job of kind of hitting the right sections of the brain, the right sort of low consciousness responses, creating tension, creating fun, creating excitement, whatever that goal is. Designs now are really hitting that. You have stuff like the mind.
So it's about experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we like experiences. We like novel experiences. We like shared experiences. We like social experiences, and games kind of have all of that.
What do you think the relation between the digital gaming and kind of physical gaming?
I mean, I think it's theoretically a lot of the same underpinnings. So like when I teach in digital programs almost exclusively. I may teach tabletop design within digital programs, but I also teach mostly theory classes. And a lot of what we talk about is completely translatable. Because again, like myself as a designer, but also theory crafting, I'm very experientially driven. So you have a lot that you can do that's intrinsic to digital games, and I think it's really exciting to explore that. Tabletop, I think there's stuff like you couldn't do a Team 3 digital version, at least not with current technology. Maybe we can get like some real holographic VR stuff in the future, but the weight and the feeling, so anytime immediately soon, you're not going to be able to do that, right? Where digital games have stuff like they can have so much hidden information. You can have really complicated and weighted random number generation, things like that. And you also have a level of immersion that you're not necessarily going to get in certain ways. So you have like sound design, lighting design, pacing, things like that, music. That can really enhance that experience or really help create that experience. I talk about like this game Dead Space a lot, which was a first-person shooter. It's probably 10-ish years old, but it had incredible sound design. It was sort of a survival horror action game, and the sound design would have you on the spaceship and you'd hear this kind of like little fluttering behind you, or you'd frequently it'd be completely silent and you'd turn and there'd be like something there, and it just did this really incredible job of creating that physiological response. But something like Jenga, I think, does that. I think Jenga is brilliant in its simplicity, in that it's creating this experience of a similar type where early on it's relatively easy, you're pulling stuff out, but then as you're going, you're starting to get more and more stressed, right? Your first pull, you're just kind of like, oh, I got it, but then the game goes on, you start shaking, you get a little more like nervous, you're sweating a little bit, right? And so the game is getting more and more difficult as you're getting more and more proficient at it, but it's still eliciting this kind of physiological sort of base level human response that I think is universal across whatever format, whether it's digital, whether it's tabletop, whether it's a LARP, whether it's sports. We look at the same kind of mental strings, the same sort of emotional connections across whatever medium.
Deep. No, yeah, well, can't really comment on that. I wouldn't be capable. You've met a lot and you know a lot of people within the kind of gaming industry and game design. Is there anything you would kind of suggest to new game designers,
people
who are kind of deciding whether to, I don't know, go out and pitch, or that they're thinking about game design?
Yeah, so I got like some real positive stuff to say and some real negative stuff to say. So, I mean, and we'll start positive, right? Because you gotta sandwich it, right? So positive is that if you make a prototype, you're a game designer. You made a thing, you're a game designer, right? But more negatively, it probably sucks. And the next dozen things you make are probably gonna suck. And then you're going to slightly, over time, start to get better and better and better. And game design is very much a craft, like painting or drawing or writing. You need to put in the work. You need to constantly be making stuff. And things that you made a year ago, you're going to look back on and say, oh man, I should have fixed this thing. Things that you made 10 years ago, you're going to look back on and be like, oh my God, what was I doing? And that's okay, and that's a natural progression. If you're feeling that, actually, that means that you are growing in your craft. If you feel like your thing is perfect and you did a great job and there's nothing wrong with it, after some time, obviously work you turn in, you should feel is the best it can be. But if you don't look back on your work previously and say, oh, I really would have tweaked this, and I don't know, I'm not as good as these people. I'm not that. That shouldn't be discouraging. That should be inspiring, because you are able to look at your work critically, and that's how you're going to grow, is looking at these flaws, looking at not just other people's work, but your own work, and reflecting on that, and trying to grow and trying to learn and always be better. And the bottom line is, in the current marketplace, especially, like, your game needs to be amazing. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be really, really good. And even then, it's still luck. It's still being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, and you're creating this luck. You're making these things happen, because these lucky coincidences, these meetings, these timing things can't happen if you're not there making this happen. But at the end of the day, right, like if we look at like Team 3, if I'd hit you with Team 3 a year before, or 2 years from now, or like whatever, or you were having a terrible day when you first saw it and just didn't have a good experience, there's so many of these little factors that can take a game from being really successful to just never getting signed, right? One of the jokes I've been telling to people here at Origins when I'm walking around with Team 3, there's a bunch of people, their publishers, friends and stuff, they're like, oh man, that's really cool. I heard some really cool stuff about it. And I'm like, yeah, remember when you fucking passed on it? Because we showed it actually at Origins 2 years ago. It was the first show that I had it at. And so, I did my rounds pitched to, 25 people, whatever. Brandon was super duper excited about it, and that got us really excited about it. So ultimately, you were who we went with, and actually I think there were a couple people that were still like, oh man, I really wish you'd gone with us. But it's funny.
Yeah, we have to say big thanks to Brandon.
Yeah, he's the thing. But it's also just, again, it's timing, right? So these publishers are looking at it now through the lens of someone else having done it, the timing, et cetera, and oh, that's a big success. But I think the publishers that are long term the most successful are the ones that can look at that and recognize that whatever success that game's having now, it's a culmination of a lot of different things, and that if they had signed it 2 years ago, it wouldn't be in the same place, it wouldn't be the same game, it wouldn't be positioned the same way through the catalog, and that being able to recognize a game that is really good, but just not for you, is really, I think, a hallmark of good quality publishing, because you're able to look at much more than just, well, is this game fun? Is this game enjoyable? Or is this game good in whatever game way? Because there's so much more that goes into it. So for new designers, it can be really difficult to recognize that your game might not get made because whoever already has a dice game this year. And I had a game with USAopoly for a number of years, and it just kept getting pushed. Various people were very excited about it, marketing people, there were people there that were very, very excited about the game, but for a bunch of reasons that were kind of institutional inertia, more so than any one person being like, well, we don't want to make this game. It ended up, getting sent back to me. I got my kill fee paid and got sent back to me after being this thing that everyone was excited about, and they signed, and it was a really cool thing, but it ended up not coming out. And obviously that's disappointing, but that's also that's the reality of stuff, right? Until it's on the shelf, anything can go wrong. And even before you get it signed, there's so many different factors, right? I had this great game where it was using, there's this movie They Live. This is old 80s sort of like sci-fi movie, and the main thing is that you put on these sunglasses and you can see all these aliens that are sort of like populated among us, whatever. So this is an identity thing, and I pitched it to IDW, who were immediately interested, except for the fact that earlier that day they were pitched a game that used like those 3D glasses with the red stuff and hidden identities, and loved that. Yeah, and they were like, well, you know, like we really jammed on this one, so like,
yeah,
you know, and that's the thing is it's these little hinges on which so much turns. So as new designer, you know, you really need to, like, the base expectation is that you're doing good work. You need to be working hard, you need to be doing good work, and it's an iterative craft-based process where you're gonna be grinding away and just doing work and doing work and doing work to get better at it, the same way that, you know, you're writing or drawing or whatever. But that ultimately, even if your game is amazing, you still need to be pushing and creating these opportunities for those lucky breaks. Because again, it's still, there's always going to be that element of luck, that timing, that, you know, whatever it is, but you got to make that. So, you know, everyone started somewhere knowing nothing and, you know, wanting to do it. So, you know, it's discouraging. I frequently start panels about this kind of thing by, you know, telling everyone that their game's terrible and it's probably not going anywhere, and, you know, like, you're wasting everyone's time. And then, you know, everyone that's sitting in there, and you know, and I say this, you know, everybody that's sitting in here that's listening to me say that and are just like, man, like, I don't know if I should not curse, but like everybody that's sitting there being like, you know, screw this guy. Like, my game is awesome. Like, my game is really good. You're totally wrong. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, maybe you'll, you know, you can push through it then, because that's what it is. You get rejected tons and tons of times, right? Like, every publisher is going to say no until one says yes, you know, and you just got to head down, power through it, you know. And if you have that mindset that you're going to, then maybe you will.
How would you, in few sentences, describe Brain Games?
So I think that Brain Games is interested in filling a space of family-friendly stuff that tends to do more mainstream success in Europe, but bringing that kind of toyetic yet gamery game sensibility more towards the global market. You know, you have stuff where Ice Cool is a flicking game, but it also has this fun little gaminess of how you're trying to position yourself, and you can play much more strategically once you get pretty good at it and you're playing with other strategic people. You know, something like Pyramid of Pengqueen, similarly has that kind of real toyetic appeal, where you have the magnetic board, and you know, you're doing the thing, and you look at it and you're just like, oh, this has that kind of toy quality, but is still a strategic game. Whereas I think the US market especially, there's a much stronger division between sort of like your Hasbro mass market toyetic games and like games that have strategy and thought. And these don't necessarily need to be huge, deep strategic games, but something where there is a little bit more to it. You know, like the US is really about like Pie Face, you know, where it's just kind of luck, or you know, Pop the Pig, or things like that, where it's, you know, the toyetic aspects are really cool, but you're not really, you don't have much player agency, right? And so you guys are doing a lot more in that space of, yes, this is very toyetic, this is very energetic. Even the Coco, right? You have the cool thing, you know, it has this real table presence, this real physical thing, but it also has strategy. It has more going on than just a toy game, right? That was so many more than a few sentences.
Yeah, no, that was good. All right. Yeah. What do you think of Origins? I mean,
it's one of my favorite shows of the year, actually. selfishly, I suppose, because a ton of people are here, but it's like one of the chillest shows in terms of crowd. Like they do fine or whatever, but like a Gen Con is complete madness. Everybody has so many things going on. This launch, that launch, this dinner, this, it's just nonstop. Like, so it's very, very difficult not only to just have meetings, like productive business meetings, because everybody's so busy, but B, you definitely don't get to hang out. And Origins has two things going for it, where it's not hectic, but still a lot of people are there. And then there is also sort of like one primary attached hotel, and the bar there is sort of like a central default meeting place, which something like a Gen Con or a PAX or whatever, there's everybody scatters to the wind, or Toy Fair. There's so many different places for you to go, whereas here there's kind of this one spot where you can just go and you'll run into people and hang out, and you'll see everybody. And this show is great because we get to actually socialize with our friends a little bit more than we do at a lot of other shows. You actually have the time to maybe sit down and demo some games and just play games for fun, and not just for work. So this show is one of my favorites, just because it's such a social. It's a really it's just a great opportunity to get to spend time with people.
All right, thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to me, for whatever this is for.
Yeah, I don't know yet.
Between two chairs.
Yeah.